Hey guys, tonight we are heading back about 4,500 years, right into the shimmering Egyptian desert, where you'll find yourself standing among endless dunes, the air already warm before the sun fully climbs the sky. Picture yourself squinting against the first light of dawn, and in front of you, workers gather around a newly cut limestone block, its edges rough but promising. The Giza Plateau stretches wide, still quiet for a few seconds before the day's chaos of building begins. You feel the grit under your sandals, smell the chalky dust, and know that today you're not just visiting, you're working. And spoiler, you probably won't survive this job longer than a week. But don't worry, this is the kind of history you can nap through safely. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're awake enough, drop a quick comment with your location and the time where you're watching from. I love seeing where everyone's tuning in. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You glance across the plateau. The sun spills gold onto the landscape, washing over heaps of stone that someday will stack into the most famous tomb in the world. But right now, all you see are piles of rock and exhausted people. The limestone block in front of you is heavy enough to make your shoulders ache just by looking at it. One fact to calm your nerves: archaeologists estimate some of these stones weigh between 2 and 3 tons. That's like dragging a small car across the desert. You probably skipped arm day for the last few thousand years, so good luck. Workers are already clustering around the block, their shouts carried by the dry wind. Someone slaps a copper chisel into your palm. It feels thin, almost flimsy, against the unyielding stone. You look at the tool, then back at the massive block, and mutter something like, "Yeah, this'll go well." Copper, after all, is softer than steel. It bends, blunts, and wears out faster than a Netflix subscription trial. Still, this is what they had, and somehow it worked. A foreman, sun-darkened and stern, points toward the edge of the quarry. There's no rest for beginners. You shuffle to the rock face where dust hangs in the air like fog. The quarry itself yawns wide, a scar in the desert floor, echoing with the clang of tools. Every strike rings sharp, echoing across the cliffs. You raise your own chisel, strike, and immediately regret your life choices. Dust explodes in your face, lodging in your throat. Congratulations, you're now part of ancient history's least glamorous workforce. And yet, there's a strange rhythm here. Dozens of men swing, strike, and grunt in unison like a slow, dusty orchestra. You notice how some workers wedge wooden pegs into cracks in the limestone. Then they pour water over the wood. The pegs swell, pressure builds, and with a satisfying crack, a slab loosens. You blink. That's not in your modern toolbox, but it works. It's one of those quirky engineering tricks that makes you realize ancient Egyptians weren't just brawny, they were clever. The desert sun climbs higher. Already your tunic clings with sweat. Sand stings your eyes. Someone hands you a strip of linen to tie around your forehead, more sweatband than fashion statement. You watch as ropes are looped around the newly cut stone. Men heave in unison, grunting, inching the block onto a wooden sled. Your shoulders tense just imagining the pull. Historians still argue whether these workers were slaves, free laborers, or conscripted farmers during the Nile's flood season when fields were underwater. What you do know, here in this dusty moment, is that everyone looks tired, but oddly motivated. The Pharaoh's project wasn't optional. You either hauled stones or... well, let's not finish that thought. A shout goes up, echoing against the quarry walls. The first stone of the day is moving. The sled scrapes against the ground, groaning under the burden. Sand sprays up as bare feet dig in for traction. You join the line, your arms straining, lungs burning, and, because it's me narrating, you also realize your gym membership never prepared you for dragging a block of limestone the size of a truck. Still, The block shifts slowly but surely. It creaks like a stubborn door, then slides forward another hand's width. Someone laughs, half delirious, when a worker trips and face plants into the sand. That's joke number one. At least falling into sand is softer than falling into history class back in high school. The morning passes in grinding effort. You notice details that almost feel cozy, in a weird way. The smell of baked bread wafting from a cooking pit somewhere nearby, the flap of linen awnings straining against the wind, the occasional bray of donkeys carrying jars of water. Against the brutal backdrop, life is stitched together by these small grounding sounds. At one point, a block teeters dangerously, wobbling on the sled. Everyone freezes, hearts pounding. If it tips, it'll crush more than toes. But the ropes hold, the sled steadies, and you exhale in shaky relief. Another fun tidbit: some ancient graffiti found near the pyramids reveals team names like the Drunkards of Menkora. So yes, even in back-breaking work, humour had its place. If you had to name your own crew today, maybe the Sandburn Survivors would fit. The desert wind grows hotter, sharper, until it feels like someone set a hairdryer to apocalypse and aimed it at your face. Every breath tastes of limestone powder. You drink from a clay jar, water warm as soup, but life-saving nonetheless. Around you, the noise never stops. Chisels clanging, sleds dragging, voices calling in encouragement or frustration. By midday, you realize that this is only one stone. Thousands more wait, scattered across the plateau, destined for their place in the pyramid's rising shape. From your perspective, it feels endless. From history's perspective, it becomes immortal. That's the slow beauty of it. Every miserable tug is one step closer to something timeless. The block grinds forward again, one more dragging sound joining the desert symphony. You wipe your forehead, squint toward the horizon, and wonder if you'll ever see the pyramid completed. You probably won't, but then again, you don't need to. You're just here for the night, for the story, and for the strange piece of imagine yourself in a place where dust, sweat, and sunlight shaped one of the world's great wonders. You cough into the dusty air, spitting grit that sticks to your tongue like bad seasoning, and now you're standing inside the quarry itself, surrounded by pale walls scarred by human effort. The limestone glimmers faintly under the morning sun, catching the light like chalky mirrors. A worker shoves a copper tool back into your hand. It looks less like an instrument of construction and more like something you'd use to open a stubborn jar of olives. Still, here it is, the foundation of pharaonic engineering. You squat beside a veteran stonecutter, his arms brown and corded with years of labour. He wedges his chisel into a crack and strikes with a polished dolerite pounder, a dark, hard stone that looks like it was stolen from the world's most dangerous bowling alley. You mimic him, striking clumsily, your copper edge skidding off with a pathetic ping. The old man chuckles, shaking his head as if to say, "Rookie." You're not insulted, you're grateful, because this block is older, tougher, and definitely less cooperative than your willpower. Copper tools, as you now painfully learn, wear down faster than your patience in traffic. After a few strikes, the edge bends, leaving you with something closer to a spoon. Fact, archaeologists have found whole heaps of worn chisels near pyramid sites, thousands upon thousands of them, like an ancient scrapyard of frustration. And yet, somehow, the job got done. Historians still argue whether they leaned more on dolerite pounding stones or copper chisels, but either way, it wasn't glamorous. Imagine breaking rocks with tools that give up before you do. It's history's slowest arm workout. The quarry floor smells faintly metallic from sweat mixing with copper filings. Dust clouds rise with every blow, clinging to your lashes until the whole world looks blurred, dreamlike. Someone nearby sneezes, producing a cloud worthy of its own weather report. That's joke number one. If you're allergic to dust, ancient pyramid duty wasn't your best career option. You watch as workers employ a surprisingly clever trick. After chiseling shallow grooves, they hammer in wooden wedges. Then, With great ceremony, they pour water onto the wood. At first it looks absurd, watering a rock, but slowly the wood swells, tightening like a fist inside the stone's cracks. Minutes pass, tension grows, and then with a thunderous crack, a massive block cleaves free. The crowd cheers, and you cheer too, even though all you did was sneeze a lot. This method is one of those quirky details that makes you nod in admiration. They didn't need fancy drills, they had expanding lumber. Dragging the loosened block requires its own ritual. Men swarm around it, prying with wooden poles, leveraging it upward and slowly inching it onto a sled. The sled is crude, 2 curved runners, a flat platform, but it's about to carry thousands of pounds across desert sand. You run your hand along the wood, feeling grooves carved by years of strain. The sled creaks in complaint, much like your knees. Nearby, scribes sit cross-legged on mats, reed pens scratching onto ostraca, shards of pottery repurposed as notepaper. They tally how many blocks emerge, who worked on them, and likely how many onions are owed in rations. Because here's the fact. Pyramid building wasn't fueled by chains, but by calories. Bread, beer, and onions were the ancient paycheck. Imagine payday coming in the form of a sack of onions. Joke number 2. No wonder the worker's breath could probably knock over a sphinx. The quarry itself hums with an odd kind of teamwork. Groups chant together, timing their strikes in rhythm. You hear the steady ha-ha-ha as chisels rise and fall in unison, a primitive but effective metronome. It's almost musical, in a dusty, monotonous way, like the desert's own lullaby. You wonder if the pharaoh ever visited, or if this was too far below his divine station. What you do know, someone had to dream it, someone had to order it, and someone, like you, had to sweat it into being. At midday, a block wrenches free too quickly, tumbling and shattering with a sound like thunder. Everyone groans. A wasted block is wasted labor, wasted food, wasted everything. The overseer scowls, scribbles on his shard of pottery, and the unlucky crew looks as though they might soon be reassigned to dung duty. Historians still argue whether mistakes like these were punished harshly or shrugged off as the cost of building big. You, meanwhile, just step quietly aside, hoping to avoid eye contact. Another veteran hands you a strip of linen soaked in water to tie around your face. It's not PPE, but it helps keep the dust out. The cloth smells faintly of barley beer, which may or may not be intentional. You sip from a clay jar, grimace at the lukewarm taste, and mutter about modern refrigerators. Joke number 3. Back then, cold beer was as mythical as unicorns or reliable Wi-Fi. The afternoon sun slants across the quarry, turning the dust into gold. Shadows lengthen, chisels fall slower, and the chorus of grunts fades into weary sighs. One last crack echoes as another block gives way, landing with a heavy thud that shakes the ground beneath your sandals. Workers clap one another's backs, their shoulders slumped but proud. You stand there, throat raw, eyes stinging, body aching, and realize that this is just the beginning. The block isn't finished. The sled isn't loaded. The desert awaits. But somehow, in the middle of the grime and the grit, there's something calming. The rhythm of work, the strange ingenuity of wedges and copper, the sense that you're part of a pattern stretching across centuries. Each clang of chisel is a heartbeat of history, echoing softly through the quarry walls, carrying you further into the story. The block groans on its wooden sled like a sulking teenager dragged out of bed too early, and now you're part of the unlucky team assigned to move it. You plant your feet in the sand, fingers wrapped around a thick hemp rope that smells faintly of sweat and Nile reeds. All around you, men lean forward with the same strained grimace, shoulders tight, toes digging into the earth. A foreman barks a rhythm, 1, 2, pull, and 20 bodies heave as one. The sled shrieks against the ground, a terrible wooden cry that makes you wonder how long it'll last before splintering into kindling. The concept is simple. Put the block on the sled, drag it toward the pyramid. The reality? Every inch feels like a lifetime. Fact, many Egyptologists believe wooden sleds were the backbone of transport. They've even found paintings showing men pouring water in front of them, something you'll see in the next section. But right now, without that trick, it's you versus friction. Spoiler, friction wins. The ramp rises ahead, an earthen slope stretching upward like an insult to your tired legs. Its surface is packed sand, hardened with clay and gravel, a crude highway of sweat. You eye the incline and instantly regret skipping cardio for the past 4,500 years. Joke number 1. If there had been Fitbits in ancient Egypt, pyramid workers would have hit their step goals before breakfast. The pull begins. Ropes tighten, muscles strain, and the sled jerks forward a few miserable inches. The wood creaks as if it's reconsidering its life choices too. Sand sprays behind your heels and your arms quiver from the effort. You're roped in tight beside strangers, their bare backs glistening with sweat, their chants rising in low guttural rhythm. The air hums with effort, dust, and determination. Halfway up the slope, someone slips. The rope jerks loose, and the sled teeters dangerously, threatening to slide backward and turn you all into ancient history's flattest pancakes. But somehow, miraculously, the block steadies. Men scramble, grab the rope, and the chant resumes, louder this time, as if volume can defy gravity. You add your voice, half scream, half plea, and the sled inches forward again. You notice details while trying not to collapse. The ropes are braided thick, rough against your palms, and they leave angry red welts across your skin. The runners of the sled cut furrows into the ramp, little trenches that will need constant smoothing. Overseers walk alongside, shouting, sometimes striking the ground with reeds as encouragement or warning, and at the top of the ramp another crew waits, ready to pry the block into place. Historians still argue what kind of ramp systems were used. Straight ramps, spiral ones wrapping around the pyramid, a combination. Each theory has its own champions, like an eternal academic tug-of-war. As you trudge forward, sweat dripping into your eyes, you don't really care which theory is right. All you know is that any ramp feels like Mount Everest in sandals. A group of boys jog alongside, tossing handfuls of sand to fill ruts, while others shove wooden rollers beneath the sled's runners to ease the drag. You can't help but think, maybe inventing the wheel here would have sped things up. Joke number 2. If only one worker had sketched out circle with axle, you'd all be home early with your onions. Still, the system works, slowly. Each coordinated pull sends the sled lurching upward a little farther. The chants echo across the desert, a rough music carried by the hot wind. Heave, heave. The rhythm drones, hypnotic in its monotony. Sweat stings your lips, turning them salty. Your arms feel like cooked noodles, trembling with each pull. Eventually, with one final, unified heave, the block crests the ramp. Cheers erupt, ragged but heartfelt, a wave of relief washing over the exhausted team. You collapse to your knees, sand burning against your shins, chest heaving like a bellows. But the block rests on level ground now, and that feels like a small miracle. You wipe your forehead with the edge of your linen tunic, streaking your face with a line of white dust. The overseer scribbles something on his ostracon, maybe noting that the block has arrived, maybe jotting down how many onions your team has earned. Payment here is as slow as the work itself, but it matters. Without food, without beer, there's no strength for the next stone, and the next, and the next. As you stagger upright, you notice the horizon shimmering in the heat. Beyond the ramp, dunes stretch endlessly, dotted with camps, kilns for making plaster, and storage yards stacked with timbers. The whole plateau is alive with the clatter of industry. Thousands of workers, each tethered by rope, shovel, or chisel, all pushing the same impossible dream forward. The block rests at the top, waiting for its final journey into the pyramid's growing skeleton. But for now you breathe, drink from a cracked jar, and let your muscles tremble with exhaustion. You laugh weakly at the absurdity of it all. Joke number 3. When future tourists stare at the pyramids in awe, You hope they also appreciate your sore back. The day stretches on, the ramp bakes under the merciless sun, and somewhere behind you, another block is already being wrestled onto another sled. The work never ends, and that's the point. Each stone moves only inches at a time, but together, over years and decades, they build eternity. You feel the weight of history pressing down, but in this moment, all you know is the drag of rope, the burn of sweat, and the stubborn groan of wood on sand. The block waits, perched at the ramp's crest, and now you see why the men ahead are splashing water from clay jars onto the sand. At first it looks ridiculous, watering dirt. But as the sled inches forward, you notice the difference. The runners slide more smoothly, gliding instead of grinding, as if the sand has suddenly remembered how to behave. Fact, archaeologists actually tested this idea with scale models and discovered that damp sand requires far less force to drag a sled across. It wasn't magic, it was science. Sand grains cling together just enough to cut friction nearly in half. A boy hands you your own jar. Heavy, its clay sides slick with condensation from the water inside. You tip it slowly, watching the liquid darken the sand ahead of the sled's path. It soaks quickly, vanishing almost as soon as it touches the ground, leaving behind a cool, dark strip. When the team pulls again, the sled seems lighter, though your arms are too sore to fully appreciate the miracle. Historians still argue whether this technique was used universally or just in certain conditions, but right now you're grateful for every drop. The work becomes rhythmic. Splash, pull, splash, pull. The jars clink softly, the water sloshes and the sled hisses as it slides forward. There's something strangely soothing about the routine. You almost imagine you're on a giant, ancient slip and slide, except instead of fun, you get tendon strain. Joke number 1. Who knew that the world's most famous tomb might have been built on the world's least fun water park? Workers pass empty jars back down the line, where boys sprint to refill them at large clay vats kept cool in the shade of woven awnings. The air hums with the sound of sandals slapping against sand, of ropes stretching tight, of water splashing like brief oases in the desert heat. You catch yourself staring at the shimmering droplets, each one catching sunlight like a tiny star before it vanishes into the thirsty earth. Someone slips, splashing a whole jar on his own feet instead of the path. Laughter erupts, a moment of levity among the grind. The man shrugs, wiggling his toes dramatically, and says something that makes the others howl. Probably a complaint about wasting his bath for the month. You grin despite the sweat burning your eyes. It's joke number 2. Even in the harshest conditions, there's always time to laugh at a guy with wet feet. As the sled moves, you notice how carefully the path is prepared. Workers rake the sand smooth, pulling away debris, tamping down soft patches where the sled might bog down. They move with a practiced rhythm, like stagehands resetting a set between acts. The Pyramid Project is a performance, and each stone is another line in a script written for eternity. You pause to sip from your own jar, the water warm but comforting. The smell of wet sand rises, earthy and oddly nostalgic, as if you're standing by a riverbank instead of a desert. For a brief moment you almost forget the crushing heat. Then the foreman shouts again, and the rope snaps taut, reminding you exactly where you are. Scholars still debate whether water alone was enough to move the largest blocks, or if additional tricks, like dragging over lubricated clay, were also used. Some even suggest sleds might have had greased runners. Standing here watching the sled slide forward with surprising ease, you lean toward the water theory. Your muscles may disagree, but compared to dry dragging, this feels like luxury. The afternoon sun blazes hotter, and shadows shrink beneath your feet. Sweat trickles down your spine, soaking into the linen at your waist. Your hands ache from gripping the rope, but you can't help marveling at how the simplest trick, just water on sand, might have made the impossible merely exhausting. The block glides forward another meter, and the team erupts in cheers. The sound carries across the plateau, where other crews echo back with their own shouts. It's contagious, like waves rolling through a desert sea. For a second, you forget the pain in your shoulders, swept up in the triumph of movement. When the sled finally rests at the staging area, men collapse in the sand, jars clattering empty beside them. You flop down too, chest heaving, the world spinning slightly from exertion. Someone jokes that you've earned enough onions for half a stew. Joke number 3. You'd trade those onions for a single ice cube without hesitation. As you stare at the damp strip of sand left behind, quickly drying under the sun, you realize how fleeting each small victory is. One stone down, thousands more to go. Yet each droplet of water, each synchronized heave, each laugh at spilled toes, is what turns rock into monument. The desert drinks the water greedily, but history will remember the sweat. The shouting begins before you've even caught your breath. Another foreman, reed staff tucked under his arm, waves you over with the confidence of someone who has already decided your day isn't over. You stumble upright, sand clinging to your knees, and join a new crew, 20 men roped together like beads on a necklace of misery. The block before you waits on its sled, ropes snaking from its bulk like the tendrils of a stubborn beast. This is the work gang, and you're now one of them. The air around you thrums with chants, deep, rhythmic, guttural sounds that pulse like a drum beat. One man calls, the others respond. Ha! Ha! Over and over, voices sync with footsteps, sync with muscle, sync with the groaning slide of the sled. Fact, graffiti found near Giza reveals team nicknames like the Friends of Khufu or the Drunkards of Menkore. They weren't anonymous drones. They were groups with pride, identity, and humor, like sports teams of the stone-hauling world. You take your place on the rope. The fibers bite into your palms, rough and unforgiving. The call goes up, and suddenly you're yanked forward into the rhythm, a ragged chorus carrying you across the sand. The sound isn't pretty, but it works. Each grunt is a shared promise. If we all pull together, maybe this rock will budge. The block jerks forward a few inches. The sled creaks like an old man's knees, and the gang surges with laughter at the comparison. That's joke number 1. Apparently, even back then, people were roasting each other's joints. The chant rises louder, stronger, almost defiant. You can feel it buzzing in your chest, vibrating through the rope into your bones. Between pulls, workers joke and mutter, their humor bone dry, just like the desert. One man brags he could drag the stone himself if given a fresh loaf of bread and an extra jug of beer. Another snorts and tells him he'd just nap halfway. You smirk, half choking on sand, but grateful for the banter. It's the only breeze of relief in this oven of a day. The overseers march alongside, not chanting, not laughing, but snapping commands. They hold reeds, thin but stingy, slapping them against the ground for emphasis. They aren't cruel tyrants, not exactly, but they're sharp reminders that this isn't optional. Your arms burn, your lungs wheeze, but the reed snaps, and you pull again. The chants continue, a soundscape of human will. The rhythm keeps everyone together. Without it, chaos would break the rope, literally. In your days, you realize this is the ancient version of workout music. Forget Spotify playlists. Here, the beat is set by voices and sweat. Historians still argue whether professional singers or drummers might have been hired to pace the gangs, but as you tug along, you suspect rhythm was as vital as food. Lunch approaches, but first, another heave. The sled surges forward, then settles. Men drop to their knees, panting, the chant fading into coughs. A jar of water makes its way down the line, passed hand to hand. You drink greedily, ignoring the grit that floats on the surface. Someone cracks a joke about bottling it as Pyramid Spring, guaranteed to taste like limestone. Joke number 2. Imagine the marketing, refreshingly dusty since 2500 BCE. When the signal comes, the chant starts again, slower this time, like a heartbeat after a sprint. Step, pull, grunt. Step, pull, grunt. The sled leaves deep furrows behind, scars in the sand that trace the journey of stone after stone. Each groove is temporary, erased by the wind, but the pyramid rising nearby will not be erased. That thought lingers in your sweat-soaked mind. These chants, these pulls, these jokes, they echo into eternity. One man stumbles, rope slipping from his hands. Instantly, another steps in, grabbing the slack before the sled can jerk. No one scolds, no overseer needs to lash. The team adjusts, voices rising louder to cover the stumble. This isn't just muscle, it's solidarity. You can't help but feel a weird pride. You're part of something, even if it's just moving rocks across sand. The sun blazes overhead, shadows sharp as blades. Heat presses down on your shoulders like a second block. But the chants go on, steady and relentless. Step, pull, grunt. The sled answers with its own music, a low groan of wood, a hiss of sand, a creak of rope. It's almost hypnotic. Finally, the foreman raises his reed, signaling rest. The rope slackens, men drop where they stand, sprawled like discarded linen sacks. Laughter bubbles again, softer this time, edged with exhaustion. Someone starts humming an off-key tune, and a few join in, half serious, half delirious. Joke number 3. It sounds so bad you think the desert itself might complain. You lie back, staring up at the blazing sky. Your arms twitch with fatigue, your chest rises and falls like bellows, and the taste of grit coats your tongue. And yet you smile. Because here in this gang of sweaty strangers, bound together by rope, chant, and stubborn stone, you've found something oddly human. You're not just hauling blocks, you're part of a choir, singing the pyramid into existence. One grunt, one step, one stone at a time. The break doesn't last long. You're sprawled in the sand, enjoying the faint breeze that feels like someone exhaling warm air directly into your ear, when the shadow of an overseer looms over you. He taps the ground with his reed stick, a gentle reminder that naps aren't in today's agenda. You groan, brush sand from your sweaty forehead, and push yourself upright. Time to face the other half of pyramid life, the men who keep score. Scribes sit nearby under a makeshift canopy woven from reeds and linen, their skin pale from spending more time with ink than sunlight. They balance wooden pallets across their knees, each one holding 2 neat cakes of pigment, black for serious things, red for important things. The smell of ink and reeds floats in the air, oddly sharp among the sweat and dust. A scribe glances at you, squints, and carefully scratches something onto a fragment of pottery. It's unsettling, like being graded in real time for how badly you pull ropes. Fact: thousands of ostraca, broken potsherds with notes, have been found near work sites. They're filled with tallies of grain rations, names of workers, and reminders about tasks. You picture some ancient HR file with your name on it, pulled badly, complained about onions, needs improvement. You sigh, realizing that bureaucracy is apparently immortal. The overseers walk with reeds tucked under their arms, occasionally flicking them at the ground when a worker lingers too long or drags his heels. They aren't brutal whips, but they're enough to sting and remind you who's in charge. You shift uncomfortably, feeling the weight of eyes on you. Here everything is watched, recorded, counted. The pyramid doesn't rise from stones alone, it rises from lists. You shuffle toward the grain store, where rations are measured out. A scribe dips his brush into ink, noting each worker's allotment: bread, beer, onions. Historians still argue whether these rations were generous or barely enough, but either way, it's your paycheck. Joke number 1. Congratulations, you're now on the world's first meal plan subscription. No cancel button, no customer service line. The beer comes in big clay jars, thick and porridge-like, more food than drink. You take a sip and nearly choke. It's yeasty, sour, and gritty with sediment. Someone pats your back, laughing, telling you to get used to it. The bread is coarse, full of husks that scrape your gums. The onions? Strong enough to repel mosquitoes, friends, and maybe even gods. You chew, grimace, and remind yourself this is all fuel for another block. As you eat, you glance at the tally marks scratched onto ostraca. Each symbol is neat, precise, the product of years of training in temple schools. The scribes are almost smug, their clean fingers in stark contrast to your blistered hands. Joke number 2. You wonder if they ever bragged. Oh yes, I don't drag rocks, I drag ink across potsherds. The overseers pace back and forth, eyes hawk-like. One pauses to examine the ropes, nodding with approval at the neat braiding. Another checks the alignment of the sleds. Their job is quality control in a time without clipboards, and they wield their reeds like check marks in motion. Occasionally, they mutter to each other, pointing at workers, scribes ready to jot down names. You pray yours isn't among them. Later, a foreman leads you back to the ramp. He waves his reed, calling out instructions like a conductor guiding an orchestra of exhausted musicians. The rope team reforms, scribes ready to record another haul. You realize the whole system is a balancing act. Workers sweating, overseers pushing, scribes writing, all woven together in a cycle as steady as the Nile. Historians still argue whether the overseers were harsh taskmasters or practical organizers. Some accounts suggest they were respected, others that they were resented. From your view, they're both. Without them, chaos would unravel the work. With them, the pyramid climbs, but at the cost of your shoulders. The sun slants lower, casting long shadows across the plateau. The scribes roll up their pallets, carefully cleaning brushes in jars of water. They set the ostraka aside in neat stacks, tomorrow's records waiting to be buried in sand or forgotten in piles. You wipe dust from your lips, thinking about how someday archaeologists will piece together fragments and marvel at them. Joke number 3. Little do they know, one shard will simply read, "Worker number 12 complained again." You trudge back to your team, rope in hand once more, stomach heavy with beer-bread onion stew. Overseers clap their reeds against their palms, scribes steady their pallets, and the chant begins anew. The pyramid isn't built only by stone. It's built by ink, by reeds, by numbers scratched onto broken pots. And as your muscles tighten for another pull, you realize you're as much a tally mark as you are a worker. Your stomach growls again, even though you just hauled down your ration, because the rhythm of work burns through food like a kiln burns through fuel. Luckily, it's midday break, and you shuffle toward the food area, where smoke curls lazily from small hearths dug into the sand. The smell hits first, bread baking on flat stones, onions roasting, and the faint tang of garlic and leeks. For once, the desert wind carries something besides dust. You sit cross-legged in the shade of a linen awning, and a worker beside you hands over a hunk of bread. It's dense, rough, and flecked with grains that scrape your teeth. Fact, ancient Egyptian bread often contained bits of sand from the grinding process, wearing down teeth over time. You bite anyway because hunger cares little for dental health. The onions are pungent, almost burning, but they fill your belly quickly. You wash it all down with thick beer, sour and lumpy, more like liquid porridge than the crisp lager you were hoping for. A young boy carrying a basket of radishes trots by, handing them out like prizes. You crunch one, sharp and peppery, and grin as the others groan about how many radishes they've eaten this week. Joke number 1. It seems the pyramid's real hidden chamber might just be the workers' communal stomachache. As you eat, the camp buzzes with chatter. Men tease one another about who slipped most on the ramp, whose chant cracked out of key, who dropped a jar of water. Laughter ripples like cool shade, a rare reprieve from the strain of hauling stone. The mood feels almost festive, despite the dust caked under your nails. Historians still argue whether pyramid workers were slaves or paid laborers, but sitting here, trading bites of bread and gossip, you sense camaraderie. These are not broken men chained to misery. They are farmers conscripted in the flood season, craftsmen lending skill, neighbors carrying stone because the Nile has left their fields underwater. Their pride is visible in the jokes, the chants, the way they slap each other's backs after a good haul. A man tells a story of sneaking extra onions into his ration, only to have the scribe catch him mid-chew. He exaggerates the overseer's face until everyone snorts breadcrumbs. Another worker leans back, sighs, and says if he were Pharaoh, he'd build a pyramid filled with nothing but beer jars. Joke number 2. You'd probably vote for him, even if his reign only lasted until the beer ran out. The meal itself is simple but grounding. Bread, onions, beer, radishes, maybe dried fish if you're lucky. Sometimes figs or dates appear, rare sweets that vanish before they're even properly savoured. Today you chew slowly, trying not to notice how quickly the bread turns to paste in your mouth. Still, it's fuel, and you feel strength returning just enough to face the next rope pull. Nearby, a healer mixes herbs into oil, rubbing them into the shoulders of a worker groaning about his back. The smell of crushed coriander and garlic drifts through the air. You file that away, medicine in food, food in medicine. Everything here is double duty. Another man jokes that the healer should just prescribe more onions. Joke number 3. Apparently onions are the duct tape of ancient Egypt. Food, wage, and cure-all. You lean back, staring at the pale linen canopy above, the sun's light glowing faintly through its weave. The camp buzz fades into a hum, almost lulling you to sleep. You realize that in this moment, with bread in your stomach and laughter at your side, the pyramid feels less like a monument to kings and more like a village on the move. People surviving, joking, eating, and slowly dragging history forward with full bellies and sore feet. When the reed staff snaps against the ground again, signaling the end of break, groans rise everywhere. Men dust crumbs from their laps, drain the last of their beer, and stretch stiff shoulders. You lick your fingers, savouring the onion's bite one last time, then push yourself up with a sigh. Lunch is over. The air shifts as the work gang drifts closer to the river. You smell it before you see it. The Nile, carrying that faint, sweet scent of silt and reeds, a welcome break from limestone dust and onion breath. The river glitters under the afternoon sun, a broad ribbon of life in the desert, its waters humming with currents that have outlasted kings and kingdoms. You drag your sandals through the mud of the bank, sticky and cool against your sore feet, and join the crowd gathering near the moored barges. Fact, stones from quarries far south at Tura or Aswan had to travel on the Nile, floated on barges lashed together with ropes. Each vessel was wide, shallow, and stubborn, designed to balance blocks that weighed as much as elephants. Standing here, you can see one already being loaded. Workers shove ramps against the deck, ropes creak, and men chant as the sled tips and grinds its way onto the wooden planks. The barge groans like an old bull, dipping lower in the water. You help steady ropes as the block settles onto the deck. The barge shifts, the river sloshes against its sides, and you swallow the urge to leap ashore. It looks alarmingly wobbly. Historians still argue how these boats avoided capsizing under so much weight. Some say they used pairs of vessels tied side by side for stability. Others suggest reinforced hulls. Watching the water lap just inches below the cargo, you silently root for Team Double Barge. A crocodile's head breaks the surface a little way downstream, its yellow eyes unblinking. The workers barely glance at it, too focused on tying knots, but you step back quickly, toes curling in the mud. Joke number 1. Suddenly, onions don't seem like the worst thing you've had to swallow today. The barge drifts slowly away from shore, poles dipping into the current to guide it. Men on deck wave reeds to keep balance, shouting instructions drowned by the slap of water against wood. You shade your eyes, watching the boat slide across the Nile, the block gleaming pale against the dark water. Behind it, the current glitters with fish and the occasional ripple of something bigger, maybe that crocodile's tail. Waiting for the next boat, you notice the riverside bustle. Fishermen haul nets heavy with tilapia, boys splash in the shallows, women wash linen on flat stones, beating fabric with rhythmic slaps. The Nile isn't just a highway, it's the bloodstream of this whole civilization. Without it, there's no pyramid, no bread, no onions, no you standing here with sore shoulders and mud between your toes. Someone hands you a reed mat to sit on, while the next block is maneuvered. You sink gratefully, watching as men smear grease onto wooden rollers, preparing for the next slide down into the barge. The smell of animal fat mixes with the river air, sharp and oily. Another worker jokes that if you fall overboard, at least you'll taste delicious to the crocodiles. Joke number 2. You don't laugh. You clutch your mat tighter. The sun lowers, painting the Nile bronze. The barges move slowly, pushed by poles and pulled by ropes from smaller boats, the current carrying them north toward Giza. You imagine the endless relay, stone after stone, drifting like stubborn cargo through the river's lazy bends. The water reflects the blocks as they pass, doubling the vision. One stone for earth, one for sky. Historians still debate how long these trips took or how many boats were needed at once. Some say fleets of dozens, a watery procession of stone-laden barges crawling along the Nile. Watching one drift away, you picture the river thick with boats, a slow parade of limestone, the world's heaviest traffic jam. The overseer snaps you from your reverie, calling for another haul. You rise, wipe mud from your calves, and grip the rope once more. The next block waits, sled already angled toward the barge's deck. The chant begins, echoing off the water, mingling with birdsong and the faint hiss of reeds in the breeze. Together, you pull, and the block inches down the ramp, scraping, groaning, but moving, always moving. The barge dips, steadies, and then begins its journey into the heart of Egypt. You lean on the rope, chest heaving, sweat dripping, and for a fleeting moment you feel it. You're not just hauling stone. You're part of a river of history, flowing just as surely as the Nile itself. Joke number: the Nile flows to the Mediterranean while you still have to walk back to camp. So much for catching a ride. The sun dips low, staining the desert sky with streaks of copper and violet, and just when you think the day is finally ending, the sound of drums rolls across the plateau. Not the grunts and chants of hauling gangs, real drums, beaten in slow, steady rhythm. You follow the crowd toward a cleared space near a small temple where torches flicker and priests in linen robes are gathering. Tonight is a festival day, and even pyramid work pauses for ritual. Fact: Egyptian building projects were tied to religion, with ceremonies to honor the gods, seek protection, and thank them for progress. Workers weren't just laborers, they were participants in the pharaoh's sacred journey. Standing here, watching a priest raise his arms to the fading sky, you sense the shift. The day's sweat and dust dissolve into solemnity, as chants rise not for hauling, but for holiness. A chorus begins, their voices high and reedy, weaving through the night air like incense smoke. Hymns echo against the cliffs, words praising Ra for the sun's safe return, Osiris for the promise of eternal life. The language is formal, but the effect is strangely soothing. You sway slightly, lulled by the rhythm, your aching muscles easing with each note. Historians still argue how much of these rituals ordinary workers truly understood or cared about, but standing here, you can't deny the atmosphere. It wraps around you like linen wrappings on a mummy. Torches flare brighter as a procession arrives, musicians with sistrums, their bronze jingles rattling like silver rain, dancers in embroidered belts, stepping lightly on the packed sand, and a priest carrying a small statue of the pharaoh, gleaming in the firelight. The workers cheer, bowing heads or clapping rhythmically, swept into the moment. Beside you, a man mutters that the beer will flow after the prayers, and suddenly the devotion makes even more sense. Joke number 1. Nothing motivates attendance like the promise of free drinks, ancient or modern. As the hymns rise, so do the smells. Incense burning with resin and myrrh, sweet and smoky, cutting through the dust of the day. You inhale deeply, almost forgetting the onion aftertaste still clinging to your tongue. The sound of the sistrums, the steady beat of drums. the flicker of torches. It all folds together into a trance. For a moment, the pyramid is forgotten, and the desert becomes a temple of sound and scent. When the priest sprinkles water from a golden bowl, droplets catch the firelight, glittering as they fall on bowed heads. He chants blessings for strong arms, safe stone, and long life. You smile at the irony. Long life feels optimistic when you're hauling 2-ton blocks, but the comfort is welcome. Historians still debate whether these rituals were strictly spiritual or cleverly motivational, but tonight they're both. The chanting swells into a hymn that everyone knows. Workers join in, voices rough but heartfelt, filling the night with a wall of sound. You stumble over the words but hum along, blending into the sea of voices. It's strangely moving, this moment of unity. For once, you're not just a rope puller. You're part of a congregation under the stars. And yes, afterward, jars of beer are passed around. Thick, warm and foamy. It goes down easier after prayer, laughter bubbling louder with each sip. Someone strikes up a song about a lazy foreman, mimicking his walk until everyone doubles over in laughter. Joke number 2. The man himself joins in, shaking his reed staff like a dance prop. Children dart among the crowd, chasing each other with reed torches, their laughter carrying high. A woman hands you a fig, rare and sweet, and you savour its honeyed taste as though it's ambrosia. For a fleeting moment you forget the pain in your back, the sand in your sandals, the dust in your lungs. The night air cools at last, carrying with it the faint scent of lotus from the river. The drums slow, then stop. The priests extinguish the torches one by one, leaving only the glow of stars overhead. Silence settles, deep and soft, broken only by a few last chuckles. You stretch, yawn, and realize the pyramid waits again tomorrow. Joke number 3. You hope the gods accept sore shoulders as an offering. The festival's echoes fade, and the workers wander back to their camps, bellies warm with beer and onions. You trail behind, feet dragging in the sand, until you reach a cluster of low shelters built from mud brick and palm mats. Smoke curls from small hearths, the glow of embers pulsing like sleepy fireflies. You duck inside, collapsing onto a woven reed mat that creaks under your weight. This is home, at least for the season. The night air is cool, almost shocking after the day's furnace. You roll onto your back, staring through the gaps in the roof where stars spill across the sky, bright and unblinking. Fact, ancient Egyptians were master sky watchers. They aligned temples and pyramids with stars like Sirius and Orion's belt. Lying here, you understand why. The heavens stretch endlessly above, sharp enough to cut the darkness. Around you, men settle onto mats, their whispers blending into a low hum. Some trade jokes about who snored loudest last night. Others retell gossip from the scribes. Apparently one managed to spill ink all over a tally sheet and claimed it was modern art. Joke number 1. The world's first failed doodle. Someone begins a story, his voice carrying in the still air. He speaks of gods walking the earth, of animals that talk, of rivers that laugh. The myths weave through the camp like smoke, half serious, half entertainment. Children huddle close, eyes wide, giggling when a crocodile sneaks into the tale. You smile, remembering that even workers hauling stone still crave stories at bedtime. You roll onto your side, listening. The desert sings its own lullaby, the rustle of palm fronds in the breeze, the creak of ropes on distant sleds still being adjusted for tomorrow, the occasional bray of a donkey. Every sound is softened, muffled by the blanket of night. Historians still argue what life in these workers' villages was truly like. Excavations at Giza have uncovered bakeries, breweries, even medical quarters. Was it a bustling town or a temporary camp? As you lie on your mat, belly full of bread and beer, the answer feels simple. It was both. A place of work and of life, where survival and community blurred together under the stars. A healer moves quietly through the camp, carrying jars of honey and oil. He kneels beside a man nursing a bruised ankle, dabbing honey onto the skin. You watch the shine glisten in the firelight, knowing honey was used as a natural antiseptic. The man hisses, then sighs in relief, muttering a prayer of thanks. You can't help thinking, not bad for a world that hasn't invented ibuprofen yet. Joke number 2. If honey's the cure-all, at least you'll taste sweet while you heal. The stars deepen, turning the sky into an ink-drenched scroll. One worker points upward, tracing Orion's belt with his finger, whispering how the gods placed those stars to guide the pharaoh's soul. Another swears he saw a shooting star the night before and insists it was a sign of luck. Whether myth or astronomy, the sky binds them together, offering hope beyond the grind. The chatter slowly fades. One by one, bodies shift into sleep, breaths falling into rhythm, a chorus as steady as the chants from earlier. You close your eyes, but the camp isn't silent. Crickets chirp. A dog barks faintly from the edge of the village, and the Nile murmurs in the distance. Life doesn't pause, even when the pyramid rests. You roll over, adjusting on your mat, and realize something almost comforting. Tomorrow it will be the same. Wake at dawn, haul stone, eat onions, sing chants, collapse under stars. It's repetitive, yes, but in repetition comes rhythm, and in rhythm comes rest. The pyramid doesn't rise in leaps, it rises in inches, in breaths, in nights like this. Joke number 3. You wonder if, thousands of years from now, people will look at your mat and call it a sleeping installation, early worker phase. You smirk in the dark, drifting towards sleep yourself, knowing tomorrow will pull you back into the sand and sweat. But tonight, the stars stand guard. Morning finds you stiff, your shoulders sore as if they've been replaced with stone themselves. You shuffle toward the work site, where groans and limps are as common as sandals. Everywhere you look, men are nursing scrapes, bruises, or swollen ankles. The desert is not kind, and the pyramid takes its toll one body at a time. A healer waits near a makeshift tent, his reed baskets filled with jars, herbs, and bandages of linen strips. Fact, ancient Egyptian medicine was surprisingly advanced. They used honey as an antiseptic, willow bark for pain, and even sutured wounds with linen thread. Standing in line, you watch as he treats the man ahead of you. The healer rubs a paste of crushed garlic and copper salts into a cut, tying it neatly with linen. The patient winces, then laughs, muttering something about smelling like a feast. When your turn comes, the healer raises his brows at your blistered hands. He smears honey across the raw spots, the golden liquid sticky and sweet. Good for wounds, good for dessert, a fellow worker jokes, earning chuckles. Joke number 1. You resist the urge to lick your own palms. You're desperate, not delusional. Nearby, another man lies with his leg propped up on a sack of straw, moaning about a twisted ankle. The healer massages it with oil infused with herbs, muttering prayers to Sekhmet, goddess of healing. The smell drifts toward you. Sharp coriander, earthy cumin, pungent garlic. It's not soothing exactly, but it's familiar, like the kitchen and the clinic rolled into one. Historians still argue how much of Egyptian medicine was true science and how much was ritual, but watching the patient sigh with relief, you're inclined to think it didn't matter. If it worked, it worked. The overseers keep one eye on the healer's tent, impatient for the men to return to work. One snaps his reed against the ground, muttering that sore muscles aren't an excuse. The healer ignores him, dabbing more honey on another wound. It strikes you that here, medicine is resistance. Every injury patched is another day the pyramid can rise. Lunch arrives early for the injured, bread softened in beer, easier to chew for a man missing teeth. You notice how many workers carry gaps in their smiles, worn away by years of sandy bread. Someone cracks a joke, the pyramid will outlast their molars. Joke number 2. Honestly, the pyramid will outlast everyone's molars, including yours. You wander outside the tent, watching men stretch their sore backs, rubbing shoulders against one another like cats. The healer hands out amulets, small carved figures meant to ward off evil spirits. Some workers tie them around their necks, others tuck them into belts. Whether magic or placebo, the gesture draws comfort, and comfort is as valuable as bread. Later in the day, a man collapses from heat, falling face first into the sand. Panic ripples, but the healer is there quickly, pouring water over his head, fanning him with a woven reed fan. The man stirs, coughing, blinking against the sun. You feel a chill despite the heat. It could have been you. It could have been anyone. Fact, heatstroke is older than history itself, and the desert doesn't play favourites. The healer smiles faintly, patting the patient's shoulder, murmuring that the gods still favour him. The crew laughs nervously, half believing, half grateful. You can't help but think that faith and medicine here are inseparable, braided like the ropes dragging stone. Historians still argue whether the prayers added real power, but in the hush that follows it feels wrong to question. As the sun dips again, the healer packs his jars, sealing them with clay stoppers. The honey gleams in the fading light. The oils glisten, the linen strips stack neatly. You flex your newly bandaged hands, sticky but safe, and thank him with a nod. He smiles, tired but kind, his work never ending. You return to camp, palms still tacky, the scent of herbs clinging to your skin. Around you, laughter resumes, men trading stories of minor injuries as though they were war scars. One shows off his swollen toe, another his bruised ribs. You chuckle, shaking your head, thinking of how historians will one day marvel at the resilient pyramid builders. Joke number 3. Resilient is just a fancy word for too stubborn to quit. The night gathers, cool and quiet, and you settle once again onto your reed mat. The honey lingers on your hands, faintly sweet, a reminder that even in a world of stone and sweat, healing has its place. Tomorrow, the ropes will burn again, but for tonight, your body rests patched together, one more piece in the endless puzzle of pyramid life. Morning light spills over the plateau, and before your muscles have fully forgiven yesterday, the overseers call you back to the worksite. The chants begin again, the ropes creak and the stone lurches forward. But as you strain against the weight, a shadow lingers in your mind. Not the shadow of stone or ramp, but the shadow of the pharaoh himself. Every tug of rope isn't just labour, it's devotion. Every drop of sweat, every blister, is a stitch in the pharaoh's eternal garment. Fact, the Great Pyramid of Khufu wasn't just a tomb. It was a carefully designed pathway to eternity, lined with passages meant to align with stars, chambers meant to guide the king's soul to join the gods. Standing here in the dust, you realize the work is more than survival, it's sacred. You aren't only dragging rocks, you're dragging a divine promise into being. The overseer reminds everyone that the king is a living god, his will carved in stone just as surely as the blocks themselves. You glance at the rising pyramid, its shape already forming against the sky, and picture Khufu watching from the palace. Does he ever see the men straining here? Or only the vision of his glittering tomb? Historians still argue whether workers felt pride or pressure, whether they laboured in awe or resignation. You suspect it was both. During a break, a priest passes through the site, holding a small figurine of the king, painted gold. He mutters blessings, sprinkling water on the ropes, the sleds, even the sand. Workers bow their heads or touch the ground in respect. You mimic them awkwardly, feeling the strange pull of reverence. The idea is simple. You're not building for a man, you're building for eternity. The chants resume, louder, stronger, tinged with belief. Ha! Ha! It's not just rhythm anymore, it's liturgy. The sled groans forward, and the block slides another hand's breadth closer to its resting place. You imagine the king's spirit floating above, nodding in approval, already rehearsing his journey into the stars. Nearby, men talk as they work, sharing half-serious, half-joking thoughts about the afterlife. One says he hopes dragging stones earns him a palace of onions beyond the grave. Another laughs that he'd prefer a pyramid of beer. Joke number 1. Eternity powered by carbohydrates and alcohol sounds like history's first food pyramid. But beneath the humour lies something deeper. Belief stitches the workers together, even tighter than ropes. Each pull of stone becomes lighter when you think it pleases the gods. Each bruise matters less when you picture the pharaoh's spirit ascending through Orion's belt. Whether faith or clever motivation, the effect is real. Your feet dig deeper, your arms pull harder. You pause, wiping sweat from your brow, and glance at the horizon. Temples gleam in the distance, their pylons rising like guardians. Priests chant faintly, their hymns carried on the wind. The pyramid itself looms, already tall, its base swallowing the sky. For a moment, your exhaustion vanishes, replaced by awe. You're part of something colossal, something that might outlast even the stars. Historians still debate whether pharaohs believed fully in their divinity, or if it was a tool to bind the people. But here, now, the question doesn't matter. The belief is alive in every chant, every blessing, every drop of water flung onto the ropes. The pharaoh's shadow is everywhere, stretching across the sand like the pyramid itself. As the sun sets, the workers gather at the base of the rising monument. The overseer announces that another tier has been completed. Cheers ripple through the crowd, ragged but sincere. Someone starts singing a hymn about the king's eternal voyage. The voices rise, rough yet reverent, blending with the evening breeze. You lean back against a stone block, chest heaving, arms trembling, but heart strangely light. You may never meet Khufu, never walk his palace halls, never wear a necklace of gold, but you know you're etched into his eternity all the same. Your hands may bleed, but the gods have seen them. Joke number 2. Still, you wonder if Khufu will remember to thank you personally in the afterlife. The night falls, stars blossoming above. You imagine the pharaoh's spirit someday rising to join them, carried upward by your sweat and stone. And maybe, just maybe, your own spirit will hitch a ride, free of ropes, free of sand, finally resting among the constellations you've stared at so many nights. Joke number 3. Though if the afterlife includes more onions, you might sneak back down to earth. The block grinds upward, sled creaking, ropes taut, and the ramp looms ahead once again. You've hauled on these ramps for weeks now, and still they feel like the desert's cruelest joke, endless inclines of packed earth stretching toward the sky. As sweat stings your eyes, you realize that centuries later, people will argue about these very ramps. Straight? Zigzag? Spiraling around the pyramid's sides? Historians still debate the question, filling lecture halls with theories. For you, it's simpler. You're on the ramp, you're pulling, and you don't care if it spirals straight or shaped like a giant onion, so long as the block keeps moving. The surface crunches underfoot, a mixture of gravel, clay, and tamped sand. Wooden beams line the sides, bracing the slope. You can see where boys dash forward with baskets of rubble, filling in soft spots before the sled passes. The ramp is alive, shifting, always needing repair. The pyramid rises in stone, but the ramps rise in sweat and constant maintenance. The gang chants again, voices rasping, the sound bouncing off the ramp walls. You join in, lungs burning. The sled jerks forward a little, wood moaning, stone shuddering. The incline steepens and your calves scream in protest. Joke number 1. Congratulations, you've just invented the world's most exhausting treadmill. No incline settings needed, the desert provides. Halfway up, the rope twists awkwardly, nearly tangling. Shouts erupt, men adjusting their grip, foremen snapping their reeds in warning. A slip here could send the sled barreling down, flattening everyone in its path. Your heart races at the thought, but the rope steadies, the chant resumes, and the block inches higher. You notice workers stationed along the sides, prying with poles, shoving wedges under the sled to prevent backsliding. They call out warnings, sweat dripping from their brows. Every few steps, someone splashes water on the ramp, dark streaks glistening in the fading sun. The sand holds firm, the sled slides smoother, and for a moment you almost believe you'll make it. And then comes the rumor, whispered between pulls. Some say a spiral ramp winds around the pyramid itself, hidden now by time. Others insist on a straight, monumental ramp stretching far into the desert. You imagine both, picturing one long highway of dust, then a curling snake of stone circling upward. Which is true? You laugh under your breath. Historians still argue, but for you, the answer is whichever hurts less. Spoiler, neither. The chant rises again, louder, desperate, almost song-like. A man beside you wheezes but grins, muttering that if they ever invent a machine to lift blocks, he'll personally retire. Joke number 2. You silently agree, promising to be the first to sign up for Ancient Elevators Incorporated. At the top of the ramp, the block rests at last. Men cheer, voices ragged, fists raised weakly in triumph. You collapse to your knees, gasping, arms trembling. The overseer scribbles notes, the scribes tally another stone placed, and the pyramid creeps higher. Another day, another block, another inch toward eternity. The ramp beneath your hands is rough, splinters pricking your palms. You think of future scholars poring over diagrams, arguing in comfortable chairs about angles and inclines. If only they could spend a single afternoon here, dragging ropes under the merciless sun, maybe the debate would end. Or maybe they'd just invent air conditioning sooner. Night falls as you trudge back down, the ramp glowing faintly in torchlight. Shadows stretch long, voices fade, and the desert cools. You glance back, the pyramid rising like a jagged mountain against the stars, ramps clinging to its sides like veins. Joke number 3. You mutter to yourself that if you ever hear the word ramp again, it'll be too soon. But tomorrow, there it will be, waiting, steep as ever, daring you to climb. The block has reached its tier, but the work isn't done. Now comes the quieter, stranger task, turning rough, dusty stone into something fit for eternity. You watch as a new crew arrives, carrying tools that look almost delicate compared to the heavy sleds, copper chisels sharpened to fragile edges, dolerite pounders worn smooth and polishing stones shaped to fit the palm. It's time for finishing touches. Fact, the Great Pyramid was once sheathed in gleaming white Tura limestone casing blocks, polished so bright they would have reflected the desert sun like a giant mirror. Standing here, you try to imagine that shine, so dazzling sailors on the Nile could have seen it from miles away. Today, though, you only see dust, sweat, and pale rock catching torchlight in soft glimmers. You're handed a small stone smoother, and you rub it against the block's surface. The sound is steady, a hiss of grit on grit, like sandpaper centuries ahead of schedule. Your hands ache almost instantly, but slowly the roughness fades. Chips flake away, dust floats into your nostrils, and the block begins to gleam faintly. Joke number 1. You mutter that you've been promoted from stone hauler to giant toothbrush. Nearby, men climb ladders lashed from palm trunks, chipping away at misaligned corners. Every strike echoes sharp against the desert silence. Others smear gypsum plaster into gaps, smoothing seams until the blocks fit together so tightly you couldn't slip a reed between them. Historians still argue whether this perfection was deliberate engineering genius or just obsessive craftsmanship. Either way, the result is mesmerizing. The foreman gestures, and you step back. In the fading light, the block shines faintly, smoother than your calloused palm. You imagine how thousands of such stones, stacked and polished, would have turned the pyramid into a beacon. Not a crumbling ruin, not the weathered giant you know today, but a glowing mountain of light, the pharaoh's stairway to the gods. Dust sticks to your lips as you breathe, but for once you don't mind. There's something calming in the repetitive motion, rub, scrape, smooth. The work lacks the drama of hauling, but it carries its own quiet pride. This is the detail that makes the difference, the polish that transforms labor into legacy. One worker chuckles, wiping sweat from his brow. Imagine being the poor soul who drops his tool and chips the edge after all this. Everyone laughs nervously because it's not a joke anyone wants to test. Joke number 2. You vow to hold onto your stone smoother like it's the world's first iPhone. The night air cools and torches flare brighter. The polished block glows in the firelight, almost ethereal. For a moment you see it as the ancients intended, a surface so perfect if it could reflect the stars. Workers pause, staring with tired smiles. Even overseers soften, their reeds hanging loosely at their sides. The pyramid isn't just a pile of rocks anymore. It's art. Historians still debate how long the casing lasted before earthquakes and plundering stripped it away. Some fragments remain smooth and gleaming, hinting at what once was. You run your fingers over your own block, feeling its cool perfection, knowing time will one day strip it bare. But tonight it shines, and you are part of that shine. When the overseer calls rest, men collapse against the smooth face, backs pressed to the stone as if to soak up its coolness. You lean too, closing your eyes, listening to the faint hiss of wind over polished surfaces. It's oddly peaceful, less the roar of labor, more the whisper of eternity. One man yawns, saying he'll dream of the sun bouncing off the pyramid and blinding the gods themselves. Laughter ripples, soft and weary. Joke number 3. You reply that maybe that's why the gods invented sunglasses. The stars brighten overhead and the polished stone gleams faintly beneath them, like a mirror waiting for morning light. You know tomorrow will bring more hauling, more ramps, more sweat. But for now, you rest your head against the block, soothed by the smoothness, comforted by the thought that your labor, however small, will one day shine like the desert sun. The final block settles into place with a dull, resonant thud. Dust drifts lazily through the air, catching in the late afternoon sun like flecks of gold. You step back, rope sliding from your raw palms, and for once there's no overseer shouting, no scribe tallying, no chant to tug you forward. Just silence, the kind of silence that arrives when something enormous has finally impossibly been finished. The pyramid towers above you now, its tiers stacked like steps to the horizon. Even without every casing stone polished, even with scaffolds still clinging to its sides, it already feels complete. Its peak pierces the sky, a sharp finger pointing to eternity. For a moment you forget your blisters, your sore back, your onion-scented breath. You are simply awed. Fact: the Great Pyramid of Khufu stood as the tallest human-made structure in the world for nearly 4,000 years. No cathedral spire, no medieval tower, no industrial steel could surpass it until the 19th century. And here you are, squinting up at its newborn silhouette, realizing you've added your own sweat to its foundations. The workers gather, forming a ragged semicircle at the base. Laughter bubbles up, relief spilling into the evening air. Some clap each other on the shoulders, others simply collapse in the sand. A priest steps forward, raising his arms in blessing, chanting thanks to the gods who made human strength equal to stone. The words roll gently, like water over rock, carried away by the desert wind. Historians still argue how the workers felt in this moment. Pride, exhaustion, resentment, or maybe all at once. You feel all those things together, swirling like the sand around your ankles. Part of you aches to go home, to return to the fields by the Nile. Part of you lingers, unwilling to leave the monument that will carry your sweat into history. A man beside you laughs, joking that now the pharaoh should build a second pyramid just for onions. Joke number 1. You laugh too, but only because it sounds terrifyingly plausible. The overseers relax, reeds tucked into belts, their sternness finally softening. Even the scribes pause, ink brushes resting idle on pallets. For once, no one is counting. No one is shouting. Everyone is simply gazing upward, blinking against the brilliance of stone in the fading light. Night gathers slowly. The sky deepens, stars pricking into view one by one. The pyramid's sharp edges blur in the darkness, softened by distance, by time, by the gentle hush of evening. You lie back in the sand, head tilted to the heavens, and imagine the king's soul one day rising through Orion's belt, climbing the very steps you have built. Joke number 2. Though if he slips on the polished casing stones, you hope the gods catch him. The desert cools, wrapping itself around you like a thin blanket. The chatter fades, one voice at a time, until only the whisper of wind remains. The pyramid looms in silhouette, silent, steady, patient. You know centuries will pass, sands will shift, storms will scar, but still it will stand, your calloused hands hidden within its bones. You close your eyes, listening to the stillness. The pyramid breathes with you, its stones warm from the day, cooling with the night. For the first time in weeks, you feel no urgency, no rope tugging, no overseer snapping, just peace. Joke number 3. You smile faintly, thinking if anyone asks what you did with your life, you can answer, "Oh, nothing much, just moved a mountain, one rock at a time." The stars wheel overhead, the pyramid rests, and so do you. Word count wind down, 300 words. Now the desert quiets completely, and the weight of history softens into something almost tender. The pyramid stands tall, but its edges blur in the darkness, the sharp lines melting into the calm horizon. You lie there in the cooling sand, breathing slowly, deeply, each breath carrying away the aches of the day. The voices of your fellow workers fade into murmurs, then into silence, until all that remains is the hush of the wind and the faint rustle of palm leaves by the river. Even the Nile seems to have slowed, its waters whispering softly, lulling the land to sleep. The stars bloom brighter, scattered across the sky in endless patterns. You let your gaze drift upward, tracing constellations with lazy eyes, the same way countless Egyptians did thousands of years ago. Those same stars shone when the first block was cut, when the first rope was pulled, when the first chant echoed across the dunes. And they shine still, unchanged, steady, gentle. Each muscle in your body unwinds, like ropes slackening after the final pull. Your hands, raw and blistered, rest easily on the mat. Your back, knotted with strain, melts into the earth. Your breath slows further, in rhythm with the desert's eternal calm. The pyramid no longer feels like a burden. It feels like a guardian, steady and silent, watching over you. Its shadow shelters you. Its stones hold the warmth of the sun. Its presence assures you that all things, even heavy ones, can find their place. So let your eyes close. Let the sands of time drift over you like a blanket. Let the night sky soothe you with its quiet glow. The work is finished. The world is still, and you are safe.